The All Black podcast is powered by our official cloud software partner, SAP, helping our teams in black become the best run teams in sport. To listen to this episode and all the All Black podcasts, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere you get your podcasts. This is the All Blacks podcast.
Kia ora whānau, welcome to episode 1 of the All Black podcast powered by SAP, and fantastic to have SAP on board. We're all about helping teams be the best run, and we have a man in the studio today who knows a little bit about that. 148 games as a player for Waikato during their golden era. 28 games for the Chiefs when rugby first went professional back in 1996 and 97, and now over 20 years coaching Waikato, the Chiefs, Junior All Blacks, assistant coach, World Cup winner in 2015, and today, numero uno, number one, the top dog, head coach of the All Blacks. Welcome to the studio, Ian Foster.
Great to be here at this first SAP-powered podcast, so quite excited.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate it. And you did the you got onto New Zealand's biggest car park today, did you? State Highway 1. Did you get up here all right?
Yeah, did the pilgrimage from Hamilton to Auckland, and plenty of rain, which seems to slow the traffic down up here a lot. But a great trip, and you know, it's always I love coming up here. I actually love the city, and it's a bit of good vibe about it, and nice to see some rain because we've got a bit of a drought down our way.
Yeah, 100%. And what's when Fozzie's making that pilgrimage up the highway from the Waikato, which he must have done 1,000 times in his life, back from being a player to being the coach now, what's on the radio? You know, is it the podcast? Is it listening to a bit of news talk? Have we got a bit of FM radio on? What's on the dial?
A little bit of both, actually. I'm normally getting instructions from my wife about what things I didn't do at home and that I have to do when I get back. I enjoy my sort of the mornings. I'm a bit of a fan of Mike Hoskins in the morning. I love the bit
of centre-right common sense. I think he likes to refer to it as, doesn't he?
I probably prefer the controversy. I just like he just says what he thinks, and it's and that goes well. But I'm also a music man, and I love my playlists and got things queued up through Apple Tunes. And
give us one. Give us a couple. What's on there?
Well, eclectic really. I
like it.
I'm a bit of an old school, like Bob Dylan and Bruce Cockburn, a Canadian folk singer, bluesy singer, is probably my favourite. So go back and research him. But then I'm into a lot of the new stuff. I've got particularly my two daughters that get me into the sort of the Imagine Dragons and those sort of stuff. And I got a son who's into a lot of weird stuff like Tiger Army from America and that I sort of get around. So Jason Isbell.
That is an eclectic mix, Fozzie. And look, I know you're probably a very busy man. Ireland's not too far away, so there's a heap of work to do for that. But you've also been out and about in the community. Was it coaching at Porapora on Tuesday, was it?
Yeah, had a lot of fun over there. In fact, my nephew and his wife just started playing, so I went down to Porapora Rugby Club by Whakatane. We had a great session with both the men's and the women's teams together, training together, and had one of the best feeds after a training that I've ever had, and just the community spirit, and just I love getting out into I guess it's not the outbacks, but it just feels like that, but just to feel the vibe of an outstanding country club and the benefit they can be in a community, which is pretty cool.
100%, that's pretty cool out in the East Bay. Plenty. Awesome podcast today. We're going to talk to Foz about his life in rugby, early days in Pataru through to being the All Black head coach. We're going to answer a few questions from some of our All Black fans, which we've had sent in. We've also got the SAP Best Run segment. Foz is going to talk a little bit about what he thinks makes a best run team. But firstly, a little bit of a warm-up. Don't want to come in too hot. All right, so a few quick-fire questions that we do with a lot of our guests. Foz, can you remember the first All Black game you went to?
Yep. Actually,
yep.
No, the answer is I didn't go to one as a kid.
Oh,
we didn't really didn't have probably the money to actually go in those days, and we lived away from the main centres. So, my first All Black game, if I remember right, was actually in my playing days. It was a test in Hamilton. So,
brilliant.
So it probably didn't have the big impact on me that perhaps it did if I went younger.
And was and this might be a tough one as well. Was there a favourite All Black growing up that you used to watch and admire, that you saw on the TV or read about in the paper all the day back then?
Look, there were some great All Blacks, particularly some of the ones, I guess, in that 70s period, but ironically, the player that probably impacted me the most when I was young, I think it was the 1971 Lions series. I think I would have been about 6, and was actually the Lions' first five, a guy called Barry Johns.
Yeah,
Welshman, and he played with a lot of flair, and I loved the. And he sort of, for some reason, he stuck in my mind. Ended up buying his book. He was the first ever sports book I read was the Barry Johns story. So that was a pretty dramatic series, that one, and I stuck in my mind.
They were ahead of their time a little bit, weren't they? They played a pretty expensive brand for the time, and there's actually a number of players and a number of people who remember those guys, and they're players, the Barry Johns and the Gareth Davies, and those boys are, really well remembered, aren't they?
Yeah, they are, and it's it just goes to show we've had some really special players in our history, but the other countries have had some special players too. So, and sometimes some of them stick out.
100%. And you were a part of pretty much a golden era for Waikato Rugby. I know you said it went through different stages, but I think you might have started all the way back in 85 and went for 13 or 14 years. Any players stick out that you played with and against as really good players?
Yep. Like it was a long period, and I was sort of like the guy that stood behind this big boulder, which was the Waikato forward pack in those days, and just picked up the dregs every time they got a bit tired. They let the backs have the ball, and that's kind of my record of that time. But we had some pretty cool people that I played with in those times, and if you. And the exciting thing is a lot of them have come on and stayed in the game for a long time. You look at the likes of Gaddy's done an outstanding job, as a coach, but he was awesome as a player, and Mitch and those sort of people. I guess the one guy that sticks out to me was probably always Dwayne Monkley, and he's in Waikato terms he's a bit iconic, isn't he? But he sort of epitomised the game for us. He'd drive up to training in his big truck because he'd been driving all day, and he'd get out of his truck with his boots on and train harder than anyone else, and then go home and have a meal about 9 o'clock at night and do the same the next day. So he was probably the guy that had the biggest impact. He would.
Am I right in saying I don't think he was an All Black? He's almost one of those people that's often spoken of as the most unlucky person not to be an All Black because he just played to such a high standard for such a long time. But was it the Michael Jones and some of the people that he played in the same era just couldn't quite make that next step or wasn't picked for that next step?
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's a lot of... I mean, most provinces have got people like that, haven't they? And partly that's what's exciting about the All Blacks, really, is that it's not only about the stories of people who get in it. It's the stories. There's some great players who probably would do a good job as an All Black, but they just don't get selected. And what I love about Dwayne is that he's got no regrets.
Yeah.
He just gave everything the best he can and was out of his control, but nothing really changed how he loved the game.
Yeah, mate, he was an awesome player. Foz, if I was to come around to your house for a dinner party, mate, there's vicious rumours circulating that you're not too bad in the kitchen. What would be on the menu?
Well, if we were really close, and if our relationship was at the stage that I liked you, I'd slow cook.
The jury's out on that, isn't it?
Well, let's see how this podcast goes. But I'd do you a slow cooked lasagna.
Oh, wow.
And so one of my things I love when I'm working at home is actually just to get the sauce simmering all morning and then assemble it, and then let it sit, and then just sort of heat it up in the oven later on. So that would be one. If our relationship was okay, I want to try and impress you, but we don't know each other that well. I'd probably go with a sort of a spaghetti arrabbiata, which is a sort of tomato-based bacon, bit of chili sauce.
Wow, I'm feeling a bit inadequate here, actually, to be honest, mate.
Bit of Parmesan cheese.
Yeah, wow. And
so you'll know what I think when you turn up.
Totally. And obviously getting an Italian theme there. Why is that? What drives that? That theme in the kitchen.
Look, it comes back to, I guess, my wife and I, we had nearly 2 years over there in our mid-20s. Went over there as a player for 6 months and loved it so much that we stayed over there, missed a season back here, and travelled around Europe and in a van with a tent, and then we played a second season. And their culture, we got some amazing friends. I still keep in touch with them all the time. We go and visit, and made a big impact on us, and learnt something very good in life over there that my coach Piero Monfalli taught me, which was the difference between New Zealanders and the Italians is that we eat to live and they live to eat, and their appreciation of food and what they do.
A real occasion.
Was definitely
so
a long one.
How do we go with the language? Are you Can you speak some Italian or speak Italian?
Yeah, parlo abbastanza bene, ma prendi un po' di tempo.
Hey, this podcast is putting me in my place. So I'm feeling massively inadequate today. But
no, don't, because I got stuck halfway through a sentence here, so I forgot the rest. So I'm actually not too bad, but I need to be there.
Yeah.
And actually, once I'm in there for a few days, I pick up some.
And you played the Italians last year, didn't you? So you would have been not just the coach, but the host with the most in that environment. You would have been very much back on the horse.
Oh, look, it killed me last year because we were in Italy, we're in Rome, but we were stuck in our hotel, and it was the hard part. One of the things of those tours is that, I mean, we got out on a bus on one day, but we couldn't actually get out and enjoy it, and it's and it became quite tough, particularly when our friends turned up and we had to sort of meet them outside the hotel from a distance, and so that was a bit niggly.
Yeah, well, hopefully that's a thing of the past. But if this dinner party that I may or may not be at, if you could invite 3 other people, famous people along, perhaps from history, who would you invite?
From history?
Yeah, or just, it doesn't have to be from history. It could be people you'd love along, could be celebrities, it might not be.
Yeah, it may not be. It's if I can invite 3 people, please don't be insulted if you're not on the list. And one guy I love is a guy called Albert Luthuli.
Oh, wow.
And he was, I read a book, it made a big impact on me when I was in South Africa. He wrote a book called Let My People Go, and he's the guy that paved the way for Nelson Mandela and what he did over there. Wow. And having been to South Africa about 17 times over, I've been really intrigued with some of their history. So he kind of would definitely be one. I'd definitely have Robert De Niro as an actor. He's old school, but I just love his versatility. Yep. And I guess if I went to music, I'd probably go with my Bruce Cockburn, actually. Just a older guy now, put out a lot of albums, and he's a bit of a poet, the way he writes stuff, and I love his cruisy nature.
Mate, that'd be a great dinner party.
Jeez, I'd probably cook lasagna for that one too.
100%. Would you say is that almost a happy place for you away from rugby, like in the kitchen or hosting, or like you say, it seems like something you really picked up on from your time in Italy?
Yeah, look, I don't want this chat to people to think that I'm a good cook. Seriously, I'm a master of a few little things. That's all. But look, home is happy place. You know, it's and Lee, my wife, she's she's the person who creates that feeling. Really, she's the glue of it all. But it's there's nothing better than being home and having people around and chilling out.
And you've got a few kids. Do they get home a wee bit too? I know your daughter's doing really well with football. Perhaps she's had some time overseas, but is there still an opportunity for the Fosters to have flat night and get them all home on a Sunday and have a big meal together? And does that still happen, or have they all flown the coop?
Oh, they're like rodents, they just keep coming back. I thought I got rid of them for a while, but no, they've all left. But oldest Marky's married now, and they've got a little boy called Bo, so I'm a granddad now. He's 10 months old, and incredibly proud of that, and excited about that role in life. Yeah. And the 2 daughters, they flat nearby, so they're both working and just finished study and looking for their next phase of life. So yeah, they pop up a lot, and funnily enough, generally around dinner time with their flats, and we have some regular flat nights, which is really just bludgeon off mum and dad, isn't it? But it's a lot of fun, and we wouldn't have it any other way.
It sounds awesome. And is there any phrases in life, whether it be around home or in the coaching environment, that you perhaps overuse, do you think?
Well, my kids will say I overuse a phrase called daddy wisdom. I used to... Every time I take them to school, every time, whenever I was at home, because I was away a lot, I'd always make sure I was the parent that took them to school. I loved having them in the car. That was my time. And I'd lock them in the doors, drive, and say, this is daddy wisdom time. And they had to listen to all the wise advice I had in life. Yes. Funnily enough, they remember none of it. But no, apart from that, I don't know. I think I'm pretty good.
Mate, have you got any annoying habits? There's a vicious rumour circulating that you like to employ the back scratcher during meetings. That's something that's made it through to the podcast.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's what's been the information that's been fed to me. It could be fake news. It could be fake news. Foz, I'm not sure, but it's certainly turned up in the notes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would testify it's not fake news. It's one of the great inventions in life. It's a little wooden thing that's extendable, and we got it in Japan.
Yep.
You know, I think it was a hotel gift or something. And the fact that you can just sort of get down your back and, I'm a fidget.
Yep.
And, we're in a Zoom world, aren't we? And so
100%.
I kind of think, well, I started off being prim and proper in Zoom and trying to do the right thing. But after a while, it's like, well, this is my house.
Yeah.
I want to relax and I got an itchy back. So,
Mate, I think, mate, go for it. Like you say, go for it. What about some of the players or players that you've had over the years? Is there any that stand out as potentially most annoying, whether it be on tour or here in NZ?
I remember back in the Chiefs days, Sam Tuitapo. I'm not sure if you remember Sam.
I remember Sam. Yeah,
Great
totally.
character.
Yeah.
Would do whatever he can to annoy you. And his one goal in life, every training, was not to learn something, was to pull my pants down. And that was that era. And needless to say, from the texts I get from him, now that he's overseas, he hasn't changed much.
Yeah,
so
right.
He would be another one.
Totally. Mate, what's the trait you admire most in others, whether it be players or other coaches or friends and family? There's certain traits that really resonate with you?
Do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
I think it's you can overcomplicate some things, but it's having the conversations and agreeing on things, and people just do what they say they're going to do, and that sort of builds trust. It helps set expectations. It forces people to have a really close conversation at the start to make sure everyone's aligned, and then you just go and do what you say you're going to do, and that way you can be relied on.
Yeah, I love it. You've had a huge life in rugby. Like when I was getting ready for this, you've been involved in rugby for a huge amount of time. I want to talk a little bit about some of that stuff. It's not maybe some of the stuff that we hear you speak about a lot, but was your early days in footy, was it traditional? Was it down to the local grassroots footy club down there in Beefhead, just playing with your mates? Is that how Foz got into footy all those years ago?
Yeah, it was. I was the youngest of three boys.
Yep.
Dad was a barber in Patauru, and we left there when we were 5 because Dad decided he wanted to become a Presbyterian minister. So we went down to Dunedin and lived in Dunedin for 3 years while he trained. Then his first church was in Mosgiel, so he had 5 years down there. So that was my first, that age between 5 and 13 was really when I started playing rugby. I played for a club. My first club was Alhambra in Dunedin, and my first season I was lock, and Dad was coach, and we had a petition, and I led it, and we sacked him at the end of his first year, so I didn't have to play lock anymore. So, but I remember going up to the Alhambra club at the top of Opaho Road, and I used to go there as a kid and just practice my kicking all the time. And I still remember the first time I ever got a place kick over. Yeah. And as soon as I got it over, I picked the ball up and ran all the way down the hill to go and tell Mum and Dad I got a kick over. So it was like we were loved and encouraged to do stuff, and rugby seemed to be a little bit of a focal point. But it wasn't just rugby; it was actually just about community things. It was cricket. There was all sorts. We were just encouraged to get out there and do stuff. Yeah,
and we did, because obviously you went on and played 148 games for Waikato. So when did that pathway start to happen? Was it at high school? Did you make some rep teams, or it was something that you were still just playing footy with your mates, and at some stage you got picked for a couple of teams?
Yeah, a little bit of that one really, because we moved back to Tokoroa and had most of my high school years there at Forest View High School.
Yep.
We built a team. We were pretty low ranked in those days. We managed to get up into the top division, and then we had a pretty special year in what was my 7th form year. Things went really well. I made the Waikato secondary schools, which kind of felt like I was the token country kid to go with all the city kids, and sat on the bench and watched that team play at the tournament. But it gave me a taste. And then when I went to university in Waikato, that's when I probably started to take it really, really seriously, and got into some Waikato teams at that stage. So I didn't really make a lot of the younger Waikato teams, and didn't make a lot of rep teams in that sort of under 15 type age group. So in some ways it was quite good. I just kept working on my game, loving it, and things happened.
Totally, things did happen, and you became part of the Waikato team for 13 or 14 years. There's some pretty significant matches in there, a couple I wanted to chat about. Firstly, 93 defeat of Auckland at Eden Park. it's still a record today, 61 games on the bounce for Auckland at that time. It's when the Ranfurly Shield was probably, in its absolute golden era. And went up to Eden Park, like they'd done 60 on the bounce, I think it was. It's Fitzpatrick and Fox and Zinzan Brook and Ngatugamala. Jones, exactly right. Absolutely stacked.
Yeah.
But did you boys going up there, were you confident? Do you think you have a chance, or was it just going to go and have a crack? Because when I look back at the clips, I think it was 17-6, only trying the game, went to Ian Foster, as it turned out. Maybe a cheeky little drop goal as well to get the game going. Did you think you're a chance?
Yeah, we thought we were a chance. It's, we came up the Friday night, had our traditional stop at Pocono. We all got an ice cream at the Pocono ice cream place. That was a great Waikato tradition. And we had a good chat that night, and it was at the stage that we'd been together for a while, and I think we were almost, the players were trying to practice their own sort of things called sports psychology without really knowing it, and we were sort of used to meet in a room and have a chat about the game, and I still remember, I think it was probably led by Mitch and Gats, this particular part I remember is that they talked about, imagine what it'd be like if we'd won this sort of stuff, and we went down that line. But it was a cool occasion. We'd been building up for that in '93. We'd actually come up the year before in '92 and beat them in the semi-final, and so we had a lot of confidence coming from that and a bit of belief. But the real sad thing about that game is that I played 148 games for Waikato, and whenever I speak, people only remember one.
Yeah, right.
And it's that way.
Yeah.
But what it keeps reminding me is that that's how iconic a game it was, particularly for us in the Waikato. But also it's an iconic game because of who Auckland were, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because of what they'd achieved, and that was an amazing rugby team. And for the whole first 5 or 6 years of my rep career, they were the benchmark, and they were way up there, and we were all trying to get there. And that era there, I think, was probably one of the best things for New Zealand rugby, because it forced the rest of us to start to figure out how to bridge the gap, and it brought the rest of the country up.
Totally, and like you say, it was 148 games for Waikato.
You've said that about 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, so
now.
that's where we just have focused on the one.
Yeah.
But was there's some pretty good players through that era, which you've just spoken about, but that's a lot of games of provincial rugby. There's no Super Rugby at the time. Did you ever think maybe you're a chance for the All Blacks, or was there any ever mention of that? Because you had some pretty good games for the Mooloo.
Oh, heck yeah, I thought I had a great chance for the All Blacks. I thought the All Black selectors always got it wrong, and now I've realised I thought they're a bunch of idiots in those days, and now I've realised it's not the easiest job in the world. So, look, it's I think there was a period there and around that 92, 93 period that I felt that I was playing good enough rugby to be strong in contention. It's and look, whilst it was a driver for me, as a younger player, I probably took a long time to really believe in myself that I could play at that next level.
Yep.
And it probably wasn't until I was about 26, 27 that I really started to play the rugby that I was probably capable of. And so, and there's a little bit of a lesson there for us as coaches now and selectors now, is that particularly in a lot of the decision-making things, we expect our young players to get everything right really quickly, and it's but you need to go through a whole lot of experiences and fight your own demons and build your own confidence to know, okay, now I can pull the trigger and just go and play and do what I need to do. And I was a slow burner in that space. Yeah.
The week after is always the hardest game, they say. Did your first defence, was it back in Hamilton and maybe playing a really strong Otago side? Were the boys, you were able to get up for that one, but geez, that must have been tough, but also good to get back home?
Oh, yeah, that was great question, by the way. I like that question, because that was that's probably the game that I remember the most, is the next one. And it's, if you go back to 92, we'd played them in the final in Hamilton and smacked them. But this Otago team was building, and to play them after we'd just won the Shield, we knew we were vulnerable that day. The crowd was just absolutely packed. I remember, and they came back near the end of the game and tied it up with about 20 minutes to go, and I think might have been Greg Cooper having a conversion from the sideline with Waikato, beer bottles landing on the ground around him. I mean, that was kind of disgraceful, but that's kind of what the environment was like. Everyone was tense, but so that last 20 minutes was pretty unique because you didn't want to be the team to lose it straight away. So very relieved with that one.
Yeah, and Foz put a couple down into referee's corner, is it? Which is the famous quarter in Waikato. A couple of scrums. Was it John Mitchell who how many push over scrum? He looked older on the clips, and when I was looking at them in 1993 than he does now with a clean dome. He looked like a 50-year-old in those clips.
Yeah, actually, Mitch is looking good now, and that's right. But hey, in those days, I mean, you get praise for the referee's corner, and that's what it was, and you kick down there. But you got to remember in those days, like that last 20 minutes, I remember that the tactics were really clever. Is that when we had the ball, I was going to kick the ball dead.
Yeah.
Because in those days, you could kick the ball over the dead ball line, and they just had to have a dropout. So, we had a very cunning plan of let's just panic and just put the ball down there. And so it didn't take a lot of skill in those days, whereas now there's a lot more demands on your kicking game. So I'll take that one.
98 was your last game. You told me beforehand you played a really good Otago side down in Carisbrook. Did you know it was going to be your last game, or did that game almost signal sort of the end of an era for you and started to think about other things?
Yeah, I didn't know it was going to be my last game. I was 33. I was captain of Waikato at that stage. We'd won the Shield again in 97, which means we lost it in 96. But and so we'd held the Shield all 1998, and so for us it was a massive year, and we had some great games. We beat Canterbury in the last Shield game, and then we beat them in the semi-final. So we had massive highlights in 98, and then we went into a final, and look, we ran out of juice, and they were peaking, and they were a quality team, and so my mindset was very much on the here and now at that point. I wasn't thinking about finishing. Like I said, I was captain, but I was also I was probably competing with Glenn Jackson at that point, and he was the other 10, and quite frankly, don't tell anyone, but he was probably a heck of a lot better than me.
Right.
And
well, I won't mention it. Yeah.
No, he was young and fast, and he was a better place than I. But I probably had the experience and the ownership of the team that. So our coach those days, whether I liked it or not, was we sort of rotated through some games, but whenever there was a Shield game, I'd start, but. If things didn't go well, then I was the first to get subbed off. So my last ever game in a final, captain, I got subbed off at half time. So, he probably made the right decision, but I didn't think that at the time. But,
totally.
But that was the end of my playing days. But I really took a couple of weeks after that and said, okay, that's it. I had my own marketing business going at that stage because rugby was. I was transitioning out, and so I had something to go to, and I was pretty passionate about that, and that's where I went.
I was going to ask that because rugby had been professional for a couple of years, certainly not enough to, retire on, and you were coming to the end of the playing days. Did you put a lot of thought into that as a player? It sounds like you did a little bit because at some stage you also transitioned into coaching, which we can chat about as well, but look, did you put a lot of thought into the next stage when you were playing?
Yeah, I did. Yep. I was... well, in those days you did because you went the other way round, didn't you? Like in those days you had to have a job and then you played rugby. And so, I did a marketing degree, went into the media world and worked for radio around Hamilton. Then I worked for TVNZ in sales and marketing. And then when rugby went professional, I sort of left there and did my own little marketing consultancy and had a few clients that I worked for. So that was going pretty well. So that was simmering away in those my last 3 years when I was playing for the Chiefs, and so the whole goal there was really just to enjoy being professional and trying to figure that out. I loved being part of the transition, and to be one of those players that tried to, I guess, help that transition to make sure we did it well, and then go into the work scene, and then the coaching gig sort of came as a. Probably because I was captain of Waikato, we'd just held the Shield, so we still wanted to defend the Shield. We had a new head coach, and he didn't have a back coach, and so I went into sort of assistant coach at that point, which was really a small part-time job in those days.
Yeah, but did a passion grow from there? Because effectively that was the start of a 20-year career that's still going today, and what's been the attraction? What's kept you in the game so long? Because while I'm sure it's a fantastic environment to work with some of the most talented athletes that we have in this country is fantastic, but also it's a cauldron and you're always under scrutiny. Governed by how the teams that you're in charge of go. It's a pretty intense environment as well.
Yeah, look, it is. It's I guess the best way to describe that is even now, and we've got Ireland in July, is that you're in the shed before a test match, and I know how much work's gone into it, and I know where the players are at. And about 3 minutes before kick-off, I leave and walk up those little stairs, and no one can see me back into the coach's box, and then you're in that little wee sort of a glow box in there that everyone can see you. But
Yes.
I sit there, get organised, and when the ref blows the whistle, I'm excited.
Yeah.
Because I love the game.
Yeah.
And so my passion is at the end of the day, it's trying to differentiate the size of the occasion and the importance of the legacy and all those little things. And ultimately, for me personally, I have to love the game.
Yep.
And I just love watching the All Blacks play, funnily enough.
Yep.
And for me, it still gets my blood going when I see the All Blacks go out and play, and I just love what they do, and to be part of that's pretty cool. So being able to be involved and influence people, but it's more about getting a group of people that are all got strengths and weaknesses and different backgrounds and everything, and trying to create something that goes somewhere. And that's the part that really excites me.
I was going to ask that because you're assistant coach for the All Blacks for a long period of time. One thing I always wondered is that, it's obviously fantastic to work with, players of that quality, but you also work with guys like Dan Carter and Ma Nonu, Conrad Smith, when you're in a back coaching role. Guys are absolute top of their game. How do you push their buttons? How do you help them improve? Because, to the mere mortal like myself who watches from the outside, they're pretty good, how do you make them bigger, faster, stronger, better decision makers? Because obviously, particularly in that first role with the All Blacks as assistant coach, that was very much your job, wasn't it? It was to work with those guys and try to figure out how to make the best of the best better.
Yeah, well, the first thing is you cross your fingers and you sweat and you hope you got something useful to add. Yeah. And look, it's quite an intimidating environment. I mean, I'm a pretty good sleeper, and I don't think I stress about a heck of a lot.
Yeah.
But I do remember one sleepless night, and that was the night before our first All Black training. And hearing you ask me that question, which I didn't know was coming, is actually it's gold for me because it reminds me of that. And I keep thinking, man, I've got to coach Dan Carter and Ma Nonu and Conrad Smith. And what am I going to teach them? Yeah. Because I'm in awe of them. And that's part of the challenge, because the challenge is if you try to teach them stuff, this quality or caliber of people and players, they're listening to everything you say because they want to learn, but because they know so much, there's a filter there, and you just got to make sure that you can't fake anything. Like if you try to teach something that you don't really know or 100%, then you're going to get caught out. So, I go back to those days and think, okay, well, I believed in 2 or 3 things as an attacking coach, and said, okay, well, we're going to work on these 2 or 3 things, and I reckon I can improve your game if we can work on this 1 or 2 little things. And so, and they may appear to be really small, but over time you build them up, and you let them develop some of the ideas, and because you can't just program your amazing players to do what you want. You've actually got to be a frame, help them and be part of the process to improvement. So part of it's putting your ego to one side, admitting I don't know much about that, but I'm pretty good at that. Now, can we work on that and let's see if it makes a difference?
100%. And it must be hugely satisfying when you put something in place with guys of that calibre, and then you literally see it come to life on the field. It's a micro skill. It might be something you've focused on for 3 to 6 months or something like that. But then to see those boys execute at that from up in the stands must be hugely satisfying. And I know you boys don't show a lot of emotion in the box, but there must be little moments where you're doing just cheeky little fist pumps under the desk going, my fingerprints are on that a little one, even just a little bit. A little bit.
There's some moments like that, and it's there's moments that you get real satisfaction in the job, and it's like, okay, well, I know that I've influenced that part, but you also know that we're part of a group that it may not have just been me. It might have been the trainer. It might have been the other coaches that have all had their little part to play. And it's it's easy to isolate one person's got the ideas, but it's a collective organisation, and really in the high performance side, it's about, you still. I mean, my job is to lead, and I've got to make sure I'm sharp, and I'm a great believer in, a river without banks is called a flood. So our job is to supply some banks for all that energy to go down, but it's also to make sure we listen and adapt as we go through.
Absolutely. Very successful period as All Blacks assistant coach, some absolutely fantastic milestones during that time. Became the head coach of the All Blacks in 2020, and it's a significantly different role, and also it's a big role as well. Did you put some real thought to that about putting your name in the hat? Was it fait accompli that you were going to do it, or did you really consider it because you're close with your family? I know footy takes you away from that a lot. It's a different role, being a lot more in the spotlight. Did you think about it for a long time, or you're like, I'm in, I want to have a crack at this? And
I didn't think about it. I probably should have. I probably should have thought it a bit deeper. Look, I did. I thought about it a lot. I sort of went through. Look, the one thing that you talked about my role as assistant coach, but man, I coached with some great coaches. In that time.
Absolutely.
And I had the benefit of working alongside, Mike Crine, who I think is just about unparalleled in his coaching of the smaller parts of the game and his teaching methods, and had a couple of years when Smithy came back in, and he's awesome with his passion and his attention to detail, and there was Mick Byrne as a schools coach. It's a whole lot of really good coaches, and I will mention Steve because. I learned so much from him and his ability. He had his fingers over. He wanted to know a lot about everything, but his man management skills, I think, which probably isn't as strongly known as what people think, but his ability to read the athlete was phenomenal. So I worked a lot in that space, and he, over that 8-year period, he kind of increased my role and gave me more and more to do, I guess, and as you start to prove yourself, I guess you get a bigger responsibility. So, by the end, I guess when I signed in 2017 for 2019, I took a long time to sign that contract.
Right.
Because 2017 was a pretty tough year. We had the Lions series, which we drew, and I didn't know that my role was growing significant enough in that team, and I really questioned whether I was still the right person for that group. But turned out that I was, and I signed on, and so I knew that I was going to be okay. Well, if things go well, kind of my responsibility was to say, well, I'm an option for continuity, and then post 2019, it wasn't just about continuity anymore, because we were slipping a little bit, and I need to make sure what are some fresh stuff that I can bring to the table, and I've loved that challenge. It's been great, challenging.
I was going to ask that because, like you say, it's a significantly different role. Perhaps in your previous job, I've heard that you're very analytical, like to get into the detail, and that's probably something you can absolutely do when you're assistant coach and really get stuck into your area. Head coach is a bit different. I don't know whether it's sort of that, managing the team role more. I don't know, and also, for years and years, we would drop our coaches after a World Cup loss. That's something that would happen.
Yep.
That changed in 2007. Probably the challenge is it the other way around? We're having some continuity with coaches, but how do you keep it fresh as well? Is that something you had to put a huge amount of thought to as you went into that job?
Yeah, definitely. It's, I think it's, if I'd just sort of been the same going from one seat to the other, I don't think that would have been very successful. And so my leadership style and how I go about things, I made a conscious effort to be really to spend a lot of time defining that for me and what I felt I needed to do, and you're kind of doing that for the people that you're working with. It's the hard part of this job is that you got people that want to project me outside into the community in a certain way, into business that way, but ultimately I kind of see my job as, yes, I've got to sell the team and the vision to the public, and I love that part of the job. But I equally love the fact is that I've still got to be what this team needs me to be inside. Yep. And so part of it is looking at the group of players we've got and our management, and looking at the whole collective and say, okay, well, what leadership style does this group need? And I reckon after 2019, we still were doing a lot of things right, but there were some things that needed freshing. So they actually needed me to get a little bit hard-nosed and force some change in some areas. And there's other things that I needed to enhance because I felt that we were progressing things really well and we needed to keep growing some stuff. So ended up changing a few things with myself, but you probably have to ask others how that's got on. But look, I've loved the challenge. I'm very collaborative.
Yep.
I work hard to understand what the players are thinking and where their heads are at, and doesn't mean we do everything they say or everything that I say, but I want to have those hard conversations. And quite frankly, the last 2 years, we've been dealt with COVID and everything's changed, but what's been amplified from a head coach position in COVID is understanding your players and their needs and the stresses that they're having off the park.
Foz, we've got some amazing fans here in New Zealand and we've got some around the world. This moment, you're in the coaching box for a fantastic reaction from the fans at Eden Park in 2015.
They're standing at Eden Park.
Never, ever seen that at Eden Park before for a player.
Mate, do you remember that, Foz? Can you remember that moment?
Well, I'm assuming that was Richie coming off the field after that Bledisloe Cup test.
It was his last game on New Zealand soil, and I was there, and I was the same. I can't remember basically a crowd full of fans getting to their feet, before a game was finished or anything like that. It was a pretty awesome moment. We are lucky enough to have grabbed a few questions from All Black fans for you, mate, so I'm going to run them through. First question from Stephen Evans. How do you see the season in the context of the Rugby World Cup 2023? Will it be about banking new players or loyalty to senior players? There you go.
Yeah, good question, Stephen. You've been in on some selection meetings, I think.
Yeah.
Look, we've had 2 years. I guess the answer to that is we've had the first 2 years of the World Cup cycle. Generally, you're trying to establish your game, get everything smooth. Often the third year is about building some depth, and then the fourth year is about just go and do it. We've had to flip that over because the first year we only had 6 tests. Last year we had 15, but we're away from home, had 40 players because of COVID, quarantine and all that sort of stuff. So we went to a depth strategy last year, and we were kind of forced to. And so that put us in a unique position. So this year really is, we need to probably... We're going to narrow the squad down a little bit. Obviously, it won't be 40. I think we're probably going to name 36 at this stage, slightly bigger at the start, and we'll see what happens later in the year. And it's really about building the combinations and getting a little bit more consistency in selection this year. So I think that's kind of our flow, and so a little bit different to previous World Cups, but based on what we've had the last 2 years, we're in a great spot now that we've got quite a big group of All Blacks now that have had a taste of it. And so now we're narrowing it down.
Now time to sharpen focus. Brett Saunders asks, do you have an effective plan for the rush defence, Foz? Do you, Foz?
Yeah, well, hey, we're working hard on it because every time we lose it gets chucked up, and there is no doubt that the rush defence, line spin defence is getting quicker all the time, and it's really uncomfortable to play against it, and no one likes it, and so. You can play it. You can use a Northern Hemisphere equation of playing against it by, okay, let's just kick everything. And so, in other words, let's not play against it and just keep turning them around. Or you can, and whereas our DNA has always been we want to play. Give us the ball. We want to be better than that and try to look for things. Now that gets us into trouble, and we've all seen that. And so, it's the last 5 or 6 years we've been working hard on just getting the balance of our kicking game, our running game. We've probably become we're instinctively a wider passing team. We like the big passes and creating space, whereas against line speed you get smacked. And so some of our instincts that potentially come out of Super Rugby and then they come to the international stage against that sort of teams and suddenly they don't quite work. So breaking some habits, we've got to learn some new habits there, which we've been working on, and we're going to really try, I guess, work hard on the kind of the length of our pass and how we kick versus some of these teams. So there's a couple of little cues, I guess. Good question.
Joshua Clark, what do you see our biggest weaknesses just over a year away from the World Cup?
Wow. I'm probably a glass half full, so I'm looking at the positives. What are our biggest weaknesses? I think there's certainly some work on areas. Like what's intriguing is that I think there's two aspects that we've probably historically been number one in the world on, and probably one's speed, and I'm talking speed around the park and speed to do things, and the other one's been our skill level. And so generally All Black players have been really, really skillful. And we just think they're the two areas that if we looked at it now, we think other teams and other competitions are actually starting to catch up because they're putting a lot of effort into those two areas. And, and I looked at the experience last year, like we had a great rugby championship, went really well, went up to the UK, and we weren't able to be fast in those last two tests. And we played two teams that were fast, and we played two teams that were really quite skillful, in their forwards and their backs. And so it's just a little bit of an uppercut for us, really, that, some things we've taken for granted has been sort of, well, that's the All Blacks, that's natural, is we're getting players through that having to learn some of that stuff at the international stage that we actually need to keep climbing the level. And so some of the work we're doing in the franchise of Super Rugby has been outstanding, but we've got to keep driving that and keep growing that.
Exciting times, Foz. COVID, it's in the rearview mirror. We've got crowds in stadiums. Like, it's all go. Whatever's in the calendar, we're playing. We're playing those games. And so we've got to pick an All Black team this year to play the Irish who's coming out. There's so much excitement about the series. They're a good team. And we've created and developed this awesome rivalry with there at the moment. And there's a real anticipation around it. When's the team getting named? What's the date and time? When can we tune into the transistor radio and see who's going to be the 36 players to take on?
Yeah, it'll be a great tour. I love the fact that you said that we've got to name the team, so I'm looking forward to getting some input later on. But
I'll slide my bit of paper across.
Yeah, no, brilliant. I've got a whole pad down here with some ideas. But it's the Monday after the semi-final of Super Rugby. So we're naming it then because we'll assemble with the non-finalists that week and get into it. But we'll name that squad. I think the Māori All Blacks will be named the next day, and they've got a special 2-game program. So
good.
So meeting with Clayton, I had a meeting with him yesterday, and we're just discussing their squad, our squad, how that looks. And look, the Irish series is going to be vital. Like what's great for us is that we're still hurting, from the last two last year, and we're pretty proud of what we did last year, but the last two hurt, and so we've got to take those lessons, but we can go straight into it. And we know we've got an Irish team that's, largely based around Leinster. They're doing really, in the European Championships, they've got a lot of cohesion, that team, and they'll be coming really prepared. So I think when you look at our Steinlager series now, is, we've got a series with some real meat in it, haven't we? Whereas potentially in the past we've had tired teams come down here, whereas this is going to be a fantastic test for us. And what I really love about it is we're able to test some of our ideas to play Northern Hemisphere teams and those tight teams like South Africa. It's all going to happen in July, August for us, with 3 against Ireland, then 2 against South Africa in South Africa. So we don't have to wait till the end of the year to try some things out, and that shortens our time to learn before the World Cup. So we're going to get some real lessons early.
You're going to know where you're at, aren't you? And like when Foz has got the spreadsheet up and he's working through it,
I avoided that selection thing. So I did that.
You did that, and I'm coming straight back
brilliant.
to it. Where's been hard? There's some obvious stuff like what are we doing in the midfield? There's a lot of great options in the midfield. There's a lot of great options in the back row. Are we looking for specialists? Are we going to mix it up? There's some, what's been really, really hard for you as you've been mapping this all out?
Look, first and foremost, it's always hard selecting the All Blacks. It's never easy, and because how much people want it, and we know where we want to go, so we're trying to assess a whole lot of things. So, we built a bigger base last year. What's going to be hard is we know some of those people are going to miss out, and that's tough. But when we look at our profile, and if I'll give you a bit of a hint with the speed and the skill about where we're trying to move a couple of things. So when we look at selection, we have those filters going in the back of our mind about some things we want to do. So, look, where has it been hard? Clearly, when we had a lot of injuries last year and disruptions in our midfield. We had Anton, who's probably our most experienced guy. He hasn't. He didn't play much last year in the Rugby Championship, have hamstring issues, and then he's come back and got injured again. So we've seen, I think, really pleasing for us is, I think, a massive growth in Rico the last 12 months.
I was going to say, do we see Rico now as a specialist 13? You know, that's his number one position?
Yeah, look, I and this is one thing about, you know, he's always come to me. We've had some great conversations, and he thinks he's a 13 playing wing, and I think he's a wing playing 13. But the good thing is that people grow.
Yeah.
And he's learnt some things about playing at 13. And I thought he finished the year strongly for us, and I think he's really taken his game to a different level with what we've seen so far in Super Rugby. So excited by that.
Absolutely.
So that gives you a clue to answer that question.
Well, let's keep that going then. Step in one at 12. Like, is Geordie an option there? Is Tuivasa Sheck someone who you think's international quality from what you've seen so far? They're doing well, the Blues.
Yeah, well, you're pushing the details 3 weeks out from selection, so I won't go too silly.
No yes or no's, Foz, but just give me something, you know.
Yeah, well, I've just given you a lot, so come on. We're pleased with Roger's growth, particularly defensively. He looks reasonably settled. It doesn't mean he's getting everything right, but he looks reasonably settled. He's certainly good on the carry stuff.
Yeah.
He's probably still learning how to link and get the passing game, and I'm not sure the state of the kicking game because I haven't seen it yet. So, but I know, look, he's an outstanding guy. He's doing a great job in the Blues, and we've had some connections with him, and I know he's in a great spot. So we just got to look at his progress, and particularly the next 4 or 5 weeks will be critical on that. But Geordie, well, we've watched with interest, you know, him playing 12. Be honest, hasn't excited me that he's gone into there, but that's okay because the way I see it is that he's played 12 before. He quite enjoys it. If it stimulates him, that's great, and I'm interested to see what it is, whether it's an option for us long term because it might become one. But I guess the clue that I'd give you is that I thought he's one of our best All Blacks last year.
Yeah.
And his goal kicking, his high ball stuff, kicking stuff, and if you start thinking about World Cups, France, big stadiums, high risk, low risk teams playing, then you have to have a back three that diffuses high ball and has got a great kicking game and is strong defensively. And he ticks those boxes. So I still love him as a 15. But are we willing to consider some option at 12? Well, yes, we are.
Yeah, totally. Flower Whakatava has become eligible for New Zealand Rugby, which is exciting. They've got a great little 1-2 punch going down there at the Highlanders at the moment with Nuggie, Aaron Smith starting a lot of games. Flower's coming off the bench playing really well. Finley Christie's playing really well. Someone you brought into the environment last year. TJ's back in the mix from Japan. Like, it's getting chockers in there. Like, you've been impressed.
Brad Weber.
Brad, geez,
coming
sorry.
Back from injury.
Oh, Christ, sorry, Brad. Like, so many good options. You're starting to nail down who you think might be the three there, or actually is that where someone's got a little bit of a window to play themselves in as well?
Well, there's a bit of a window. It's we've got a reasonably clear idea. We're just watching the last 2 or 3 weeks. You talk about tough positions. You know, I think I'd say 9's probably tougher than even. Probably 9, loose head prop would be the two that there's real opportunity, and there's been the most conversation around the table. So, and the 9's a great conversation because we've got some great players.
Yeah, and a bit different. Like, they're a little bit different how
absolutely.
They take the game on.
So it's hard to compare some of those players with each other because they are completely different. And so it's how you balance up their strengths and weaknesses and put it into the team mix.
Last one, the back row, where I want to talk a little bit about. We've got some guys playing really well there, like and different sort of guys as well. Like, do we see Artie as a specialist number 8 now? Is there an option that someone like Dalton, who's almost best on show in Super Rugby at the moment, could go to 6 and do a bit of a Michael Jones because he's big, like he's a big bugger. So are those sort of things on the table, or
look, they're all on the table. The tables, we're open to ideas. Just bring them on in. So it's look, love Dalton, love what he's doing. Loved him last year. I thought he really put his hand up as an international 7.
Made about 400 tackles against Ireland or something, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. And so he's growing a lot. There's a lot of different styles of loose forwards that we've got. if I answer some of your questions, we see Artie as an 8 and we see Artie as a 7.
Yep.
I'm quite happy playing Artie in both positions. I love him as a rugby player. He's dynamic. But, there's some massive strengths for him at 8 at the moment because we can free him up a little bit with his ball carrying. And so that's part that we do like. We've got great options at 7. And it is an area that we could be looking at a little bit of versatility and mix and matching. We've often talked to Dalton about, playing a bit at 6. And really, if you look at the modern game, the only area that you'd probably say, okay, well, it's not a good idea and is probably at the line-out stage because suddenly if you're going with Dalton and Artie and Sam, you've basically got, 3, sort of a shorter, loose forward trio. But there's ways around that. And quite frankly, both Artie and Dalton particularly are actually really growing their skills in the line-out. So it is an option for us.
Last question on the squad, and probably linked two together. Is there room for a bolter? Is there room for someone that we haven't seen on the team sheet before? Or maybe could it be something a bit different at lock? We've got perhaps that's an area we need to see a bit more depth. People, James Tucker's playing well, could be a bolter. Luke Romano's born again with the Blues, and he's a big body. Is it maybe in the locking department where we might see something a bit different, or there's room for that bolter?
I'm not sure there's going to be a bolter in the locks, but is there going to be room for a bolter? I don't think there's a room for. I don't think there'll be a name pop up way outside the square that people aren't used to. Well, is there potential for some new All Blacks? Then the answer is yes.
I like it. Look, it's anything in particular you're looking forward to about the Irish series, Foz? I think you probably covered a bit of it, but it's exciting, isn't it? It's the first time I think in my All Black supporting memory that there's real anticipation, and I'm phenomenally excited about the June series. And I don't want to say that in a way that I'm being arrogant as an All Black supporter, but we do often get some teams turn up that are a bit tired. It's a really long season up north, and they often maybe don't send a full squad, or they come really fatigued because they've played club finals right up until May and European competitions. But I get the feeling that the Irish are going to send down a really good side. And like you say, that it's based around the strength of Leinster, which are doing really, really well. They've got 5 games, so it's they have the ability to improve over sort of a 6-week period. Like, what's standing out for you as the things you're most excited about as they're about to turn up on our shores?
Look, we're really excited about the rugby, and I guess we'll have a lot of time to talk about that closer to the tour, and it's going to be 2 heavyweights having a good crack at each other, and it's over 3 tests, so it's who learns and adapts the most. I tell you what, I think the boys and myself are looking forward to the most, and that is that in the last 2 years we've had 2 or 3 big games in New Zealand, and the rest of them have been away, and we've been an away team. And and we've been away from our fans. We haven't been able to play in front of our friends and families in our own community. And even when we've gone overseas, family and friends haven't been able to come over and support us. And it's I know we're a big business and it's a big game and we've got to perform it. But what I'm excited about is connecting with our rugby fraternity.
It's the New Zealand All Blacks, isn't it? And we're
That's
playing
right.
in New Zealand.
And look, we are so excited about playing in New Zealand, big test matches, and trying to really reconnect. We feel like it's been tough to connect with our fans the last couple of years, but just a chance to get excited with them about a big series and to go out and feel that support from the crowd. And that's probably the thing that we're looking forward to the most on our own soil.
Brilliant. Foz, time for the SAP Best Run segment, and perhaps this moment would be one of your most memorable in the coaching box.
As New Zealand try and find a way through. Smith feeds to Kano.
Let it go!
Carter goes for the drop goal. Dan Carter! What a kick! He did it against South Africa, and he's done it again in the final.
Great moment, Foz. 2015 World Cup final. Perhaps maybe, an example of a best run team when all the different elements that require absolute peak performance came together. Would that be an example of perhaps one of the best environments you've been involved in with guys like Dan doing amazing things like that?
Yeah, no doubt about it. You don't achieve those things by luck. So there was but just the great connection between, great leadership. I thought, Steve did an outstanding job setting that campaign up. But the collective buy-in from our players, and you talk about Dan, but let's talk a lot about Richie and Rito and Conrad and Ma and Kevin Mialama and all. It was a very, very special group of people that were absolutely passionate about the black jersey. And what I loved about that is that when you're trying to run your team, you're trying to create new horizons, aren't you?
Yeah.
And we'd never won a World Cup away from home.
Yeah.
We'd been a home World Cup team, and it's pretty hard to describe yourself as great when the only stage, the big stage you really win on is at home. And so, going up to the UK and doing something that no other All Black team had done was really what stimulated that group, and it drove them to an organisational level that we were thorough, but we were relaxed and confident.
It's awesome to have SAP on board with the podcast, and they pride themselves on powering the best run teams. I'm going to ask you a few questions about that, specifically about that, Foz, and it's probably hard to dial down, but is there two or three factors for success that you've seen from your playing days as well, all the way through to your job as head coach now, that really create a best run team, and maybe drill down into one of those?
Yeah, look, every team will operate in a different way. I think for us, in terms of best run, I think there's a couple of things that we've learnt, that the bigger the challenge you got, the more you got to know who you are. Yep. Because when time gets really, really tough, you need to draw down into something. And so it's a little bit of that. So when we talk about the All Black legacy, it's a little bit about that's the power that actually drives us. So how we run our team to make sure that we're connected to that power source in us, which is really important to us. So I think that's really, really important. And I think the other thing that we take a lot of pride on is really driving the clarity of your roles and making sure that people have a real understanding of who they are in this group and the job that they have to do. And so that way you don't have people feeling not valued here or not sure, and that's when we feel performance goes down. Whereas if people know that this is what we need you to do, and if you don't do it, we're not going to get where we want to go, then that puts value on that role, and people respond to that.
And for you, Foz, what do you do? Like, what do you individually as a coach? Like, what do you do to continue to grow? Because you've been in the game for a really long time, 20 plus years. But I'm sure making sure that you improve is a massive part of what you're trying to achieve as well.
Absolutely, it's it's you want to think that you know everything when you've been around a long time, and you certainly learn very quickly that I guess part of wisdom is knowing what you don't know, and so I'm forever trying to find new little avenues to challenge my thinking and how we go about it. So there's different people. I got an ex flatmate of mine from university days who was world vice president of Unilever, and so he's very high powered up. Right. So he's a guy that I'll go to and link in with sort of business frameworks and how people are thinking and some of that sort of stuff. I spend a lot of time pulling our game apart and talking to people outside our group just to get different views. And one really exciting thing going forward for us is I guess the appointment of when Foxy retires in July, getting Joe Smith into that selector's role. And so suddenly we've got, not only have I got a great replacement for Foxy, but I've got someone who's been an international head coach, really successful, and he's got a Northern Hemisphere brain on him, or knowledge on him and he can come back and challenge us on some things that we're doing from that side. So being open to challenge has been the key theme the last 4 or 5 months because, we got a few lessons last year and we've got to learn them.
I love that. And lastly, Foz, which team or individual do you admire in world sport? There's some pretty impressive high performance teams out there. I know at times you're really lucky to be going to different environments and see how they tick. Is there an individual or team in particular that sticks out for you?
Yeah, I guess there's a few. Everton soccer team.
Yeah.
That's only because of my soccer team.
I was going to say, is that
and they're just avoiding relegation, so I'll move on from that one. But you got to say them, and it's look. I think in terms of a closer relationship, and probably over the last while, a team like the Melbourne Storm.
Yep.
With Craig and with Frank there, they've done some. They've been able to stay at the top really consistently, and and apply some really good. It's a values-based model, which I love. It's not a gimmicky-based thing that they're trying to tweak things and inspire people through a new name or something. But they've got some really good, strong values to them. So it's those sort of organisations that I kind of love hearing about. That there's a bit of prolonged success and they do it through their people.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, mate. We've ticked over an hour. We've had a good yarn already.
Wow.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. Good luck for the upcoming series. Really excited to hear about the team on June the 13th. And I wish you all best for the Ice Shoes and the rest of the season as well. Appreciate you coming in.
Thanks very much, Rob. Appreciate it.
The All Blacks podcast is powered by our official cloud software partner, SAP, helping our teams in black be the best run in sports. Hosted by Rob Dunne in the Hargrave Street studio. Produced by Carl Thompson from Blue and Ginge, the podcast producers. Video editing by Mac Leesburg, graphics by Western Design, content advising from Andy Burt, and commercial manager for the podcast is Valeska Hove. Follow the All Blacks podcast on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere you get your podcasts.